Well, good afternoon and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Andrew Doffney. I'm the Instruction and Outreach Librarian at the New Jersey State Library. And our presenter today is going to be Stephanie Ghetto from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection's Fish and Wildlife Bureau. So welcome, Stephanie. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. And we're going to be talking about bears. A lot of people might find it strange that bears are part of New Jersey's fauna, but they do play an important role in the northern part of the state. And so we're going to be talking about kind of the history of bears in New Jersey, as well as some of the efforts that the DEP is taking to monitor bears, and then some tips that we can all utilize to not only keep ourselves safe, but also the bears safe, since we do coexist in the same area. So, as I mentioned, Stephanie does work for the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, Fish and Wildlife in the Bureau of Information and Education, and she is the organization's Bear Outreach Specialist. She received her BA in English Literature from Delaware Valley University before completing two master's degree, an MS in Ecology and Evolution from Montclair State University, as well as an MS in Molecular Biology from New Mexico State University, where she worked on projects related to harmful algae blooms, disease emergence in freshwater turtles, and algal cultivation for sustainable biofuel production. Her passion for science education, as well as in environmental and wildlife conservation, led her to the New Jersey Fish and Wildlife, where she hopes to inspire and educate the public for years to come. So welcome, Stephanie. Thank you so much for joining us today. I just have a few housekeeping items to go over. First and foremost, we will be taking your questions at the end of the program, but please feel free to submit them at any time using the Q&A or the chat features in the Zoom dashboard. I will be sharing a Know the Bear Facts brochure in the chat once we get underway, so you can download it there. If you have any problems downloading it from the chat, it'll also be available in a follow-up email as well. As always, we do have a survey at the end of the program, so if we have time, we ask you please complete the survey. We really appreciate any and all feedback that you can give us. And if you want to explore bears in New Jersey at your leisure, the DEP has a fantastic bear site with all sorts of information, so I will send that link as well out in the chat, and I encourage you to look at that at your leisure. And then one last thing I want to go over is just a brief overview of the Zoom dashboard. This is what your dashboard should look like if you're using a PC or a Mac. If you're using a mobile device, the dashboard may look a little bit different, but all of the features will still be there. In the bottom left-hand corner, you can check your audio settings. So if you're using an external listening device, like a headset or earbuds, you can check to make sure it's connected properly there. At any point, if you have any issues, there is a raise hand button here in the middle. You can click on that and that'll alert me. I will send you a message in Zoom and hopefully be able to resolve any problems that you are having. And then, as I mentioned, if you do have any questions, you can either use the chat button or the Q&A button to type your questions to us, and we'll be happy to address them at the end of Stephanie's presentation today. So that is everything that I have for you. So it's my pleasure to turn it over to Stephanie now.
Thank you so much. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay. Is everyone able to see my presentation? Does that look good?
Looks good.
Okay, great. So, hi everyone. My name is Stephanie, and I am excited to talk to you about black bears in New Jersey today. We'll cover a lot of ground here, so I'll start off just giving you a little bit of information about the history of black bears in our state, and then we'll move into some basic black bear biology, and we'll talk about the research program that we have at Fish and Wildlife, in which we manage our bear population as well as conserve them. We will then talk about problems that can occur due to the fact that humans and black bears live relatively closely with each other in New Jersey. And we'll talk about how we as an agency take steps to prevent bears becoming a nuisance and to also protect the bears. We'll end with some prevention and safety tips so that you know what to do to discourage bears from coming onto your property, and also what to do if you're out hiking, camping, fishing, and you run into a black bear. So just to start off, they are a native species to New Jersey, so they were here during pre-colonial times. They historically lived in pretty much any region in the US that was forested. And they were an important natural resource to Lenni Lenape Native Americans, the Native Americans that lived in the Northwest New Jersey area. Not only were they a food source for them, but they also used their fats to burn oil. They used their bones and claws for jewelry and weapons, and they appeared in a lot of their traditional stories. So they're a very important part of New Jersey's history. Unfortunately, black bears did almost become extirpated or locally extinct. When European settlers came in the 1800s, they clear-cutted a lot of that forested habitat that the black bears needed to survive. They also saw black bears as a threat to their crops and agriculture, or than their livestock, so they killed them indiscriminately. Back then, there was no laws protecting them or regulating harvest numbers. So due to the indiscriminate killing and the loss of habitat, we almost lost black bears in New Jersey. Thankfully, though, they are a bit of a conservation success story. There was a lot of factors that sort of led to this. One of them was in the 1900s when industry started changing, a lot of that cleared land was sort of reclaimed as people abandoned it to move on to other forms of industry. So a lot of the area that was clear cut for timber or for agriculture was abandoned. So they started regaining their habitat back. In 1953, what was really important was they were classified as a game animal, meaning that there was lots of rules and regulations surrounding the killing of a black bear. So there was regulated hunting seasons with bag limits and regular monitoring to determine if the population was even healthy enough to support a hunt. So we did have hunting seasons on and off through 1970. However, in 1971, our Fish and Game Council closed the hunt because the information that our biologists were collecting at the time indicated that there was likely less than 100 bears in New Jersey. So we hadn't given the population enough time to rebound. 1980 is officially when the Black Bear Project began at Fish and Wildlife. So when we officially began conducting research, so we now have over 40 years of data on our state's black bears. Through 1990, from that point, we would describe their population as manageable. We would get some calls, mostly relating to complaints about garbage, minor damage, but nothing, the calls were few and far between. However, that changed in 1999. So that was the year that we received upwards of 2,000 phone calls complaining about agricultural damage, personal property damage, garbage complaints, and concerning behavior by black bears. So due to that and the biological information that we were collecting suggesting that their population was doing really well, Fish and Wildlife proposed to reopen the hunt at that point in the year 2000. If you know anything about the bear hunt in New Jersey, though, you do know that it is highly controversial, and the hunt was stopped that year. It did not go forward. And Governor Whitman, who was the providing governor at that time, instead allocated a lot of money to us at Fish and Wildlife to promote our black bear education program, to instead educate residents on things like proper garbage securement and how to reduce the possibility of having a black bear encounter as a form of non-lethal management. So 2001 is really when our education efforts intensified and we built up our black bear education program, which this presentation is a part of. So now we'll kind of pivot into some basic black bear biology. They are our largest land mammal here in New Jersey. So as I mentioned before, they need that forested habitat to live. Trees are very important to their ecology. It shapes not only their diet, which we will talk about in future slides, but also their behavior. Black bears are very shy animals, and part of this is because they evolved to live in these heavily forested regions. When they sense danger or they perceive something as a threat, it's easy for them to run up a tree, and they feel pretty safe up there, and mothers will teach their cubs to run straight up a tree at the first sign of danger. So they have really short, curved claws that make them excellent climbers. This is one of the big differences between black bears and grizzly bears. If you know anything about grizzly bears, you know that they are much more aggressive. Grizzly bears evolved to live in the open plains, even though we've kind of shifted them up into the mountains in more recent times. They evolved to live in areas where there was no trees, so they were outwardly much more aggressive, whereas black bears had that ability to utilize trees to run up for safety. So this map here shows everything in green we would consider good bear habitat. So the green part in Northwest New Jersey is where still today most of the bears are concentrated, that mountainous region with lots of forests. The green part down by Bear Management Zone 6, that's the Pine Barrens. So that's also good bear habitat, though we don't really have a population down there. And what's red is what we would consider poor black bear habitat. So not heavily forested, very urban. The areas that are near Philadelphia, New York City especially, we would consider that poor bear habitat. And it used to be, this is a map from 1995 showing their distribution based on phone calls reporting bear activity to Fish and Wildlife. It used to be that most of that bear activity was confined to that good bear habitat in the northwestern part of the state. But then as time went on, this is a map from 2000, you can see that we're starting to notice bear activity southward and eastward in the state, all the way up to our map from 2023. We now know that there's bear activity in all 21 counties of New Jersey. So no matter where you are in New Jersey, you have the possibility of having a black bear encounter. So black bears are what we call opportunistic omnivores. 75% of their diet is plant-based. They're also eating insects and small mammals. And what they eat primarily does depend on the season. In the spring, they're eating a lot of new vegetation. In the summer, they're mostly eating soft mass, so fruits and berries, things that trees and shrubs will grow. And in the fall, they're mostly eating hard mast, so hard things that trees produce, such as acorns or hickory nuts. So I always like to mention black bear is a species designation, but not necessarily a descriptor. Not all black bears are actually black. In New Jersey, most of them are. Out west, you can get more color variety like blonde, brown, even a bluish gray color. And if you've ever heard of something called a spirit bear, that's a white, leucistic black bear. In New Jersey, they are mostly white. About 15% of them have a white chest marking called a chest blaze. And we do have, I would say, maybe 1% of our population every once in a while will get what we refer to as a cinnamon phase bear. So like this little cub on the right-hand side. But regardless of the color, they are still the same species. So the advice and the biology all applies to them no matter what color they physically are. So just a couple more things about black bears. They have excellent senses of smell and hearing. Their sense of smell is their strongest sense. They can smell food from about 2 miles away. They're excellent climbers. We talked about their short curved claws, which is an adaptation that allows them to climb very well. So if you are out and you find yourself needing to put distance between yourself and a black bear, climbing a tree is not really a good idea. They are much better climbers than you, and it might inspire the desire in them to climb up the tree after you. So they're pretty quick. They can run up to 35 miles per hour. For context, the average man runs about 6 to 7 miles per hour, so they're also faster than us. They are crepuscular, meaning that they are most active at dawn and dusk, and they can live for about 25 years. The oldest bear that we handled through its life in New Jersey was 29. I think the record is almost 40, but on average, it's about 25 years. So black bears perform a lot of ecosystem services. They are an integral part of a healthy ecosystem. They control insect populations. They love to eat bugs and their larvae. And of course, bugs can be a vector for many diseases, so they help to keep those populations in control. They are seed dispersers. So when they are eating fruits and berries and then traveling out and then defecating, they are spreading those seeds further than they normally would have been able to with just wind. They also, when they're looking for bugs or roots, they'll tear apart logs and dig into the soil, which helps aid in the decomposition process. So they help in returning these nutrients back to the soil. They also eat carrion, so dead animals. That's probably one of the only times that you'll see them eating a dead deer, adult deer at least, is if it was already dead. And of course, this helps clean up the landscape because carrion can also be a host for disease. So New Jersey bears are kind of a special story. A lot of people don't realize this, but bears in our state tend to be larger, reproduce at a younger age, give birth to more cubs than in other parts of the country. And the cubs also have a better chance at surviving. So our cub survival rate is very high for a wild animal. It's about 70% of cubs will reach their first birthday. And by the time they reach their first birthday, that number goes up to 90% that they will reach full adulthood. So that's really high for a wild animal. Um, and we'll talk a little bit more about how big they can get. But just one more thing, in regard to them reproducing at a younger age, the national average is about 3 to 4, even 5 and 6 in parts of the Midwest that bears will be able to reproduce. Bears in our state, we've recorded bears reproducing at the age of 2, even though 3 is still the average. And the average number of cubs for bears in New Jersey is 3. I believe the national average is 2, but we have found bears with, 4, 5, and 6 cubs. So we are recording much higher numbers of cubs than in other parts of the country. And we believe that all of this is due to our abundant natural food sources. We have a lot of oak trees. We have an abundant hard mast for them to consume in the fall. So all of these factors contribute to the fact that our bear population is growing every year. So adult males, they're referred to as boars, and they can get quite large. Their average is just under 400 pounds, but we have handled multiple bears 700 plus pounds. So both of these bears in these photos were sedated for different reasons. The bear on the left-hand side had sustained a pretty deep laceration on its nose when it was attempting to get into a dumpster. And so one of our wildlife veterinarians, well, we sedated the bear to stitch up the nose, and that bear weighed 726 and a half pounds. The bear on the right-hand side, that was a bear that we trapped during our research trapping season, which we'll talk about in future slides. So that bear was sedated so that biologists could collect data from that bear. We didn't get a weight on this one, but the man standing behind, that's one of our wildlife biologists. He's about 6'2", 6'3". He's not a small guy. And that bear is absolutely dwarfing him. So we also know now that the largest boar that was harvested in the hunt, dressed weight was about 770 pounds. So we estimate that the live weight was upwards of 850 pounds. Adult females are smaller. On average, they're just under 200 pounds, but they can get to be 400-ish pounds. It's just not as common. Females also have a smaller home range. So the blue line in this map shows a female home range. Typically, they're less than 2 square miles, whereas the male's home range will be closer to 6 to 8. And there typically is multiple females in one male's home range. So there's a couple times in the year that you're going to be more likely to spot a bear because bear activity is higher than normal. And the first time is during their breeding season. So that starts in late May and will go all the way through August. And during this time, females are preparing to have cubs again. So females will have cubs about every other year because the cubs will stay with them for about a year and a half. And bears at this time are not only out searching for mates, but their yearlings from a year and a half ago are also dispersing at this point. So when cubs, we actually call them subadults at this time when they're over a year. Once they are that old, about a year and a half, the female will kick out the cubs, and the female cubs will be permitted to share some of the sow's home range, but the or the male cubs will be kicked out further. And that helps promote genetic diversity to discourage inbreeding between sons and with sisters and with their mother. So black bears are polygamous and polyandrous, so just fancy words for saying that both males and females will mate with multiple partners. And they undergo something fascinating called delayed implantation. So even though their breeding season is in the summer, black bears will not officially become pregnant until November. And that is because, so these fertilized egg or eggs will stay suspended in her body until she has gone through what we'll talk about next, the fall hyperphagia. So fall hyperphagia is the period of time, usually in September and October, when bears are absolutely eating as much as they possibly can to prepare for winter hibernation where they won't eat for 4 or 5 months. So the female's pregnancy is dependent on whether or not she can consume enough calories during the fall to sustain a pregnancy through hibernation. So they're eating about 20,000 calories a day at this point. And if the female doesn't consume enough calories, then those eggs just get reabsorbed by her body. But if she consumes enough calories in that fall period, then the eggs will implant into her uterus. So fall is the other time of the year when you are more likely to see a bear. Bear activity is high as these bears are out and about searching for as much food as they can possibly consume. So bears will enter their dens November through December. And den structures vary in New Jersey. The most common is just this bottom right picture called the ground nest. The bears will just curl right up in that depression in the ground. But bears also might utilize hollow trees, rock cavities, or even sometimes when a tree falls, it will make a very convenient little depression covered with roots for them. So black bears are not what we would consider true hibernators. We use the term hibernation, and you'll hear a lot of bear biologists use that term, mostly because people understand what it means, and it is a form of hibernation, what they do. But technically, what they undergo is called torpor. So it's like hibernation where it's a period of decreased physiological activity. So their heart rate, their respiration rate, their body temperature, their metabolic activity all decreases, just not to the degree that a true hibernator would. So they can wake easily. And especially if it's a warm day in the winter, bears may wake to search for food. So if you live in an area that has a dense bear population, you should be aware to take precautions throughout the year. So cubs are born in January. They're born very small and pretty helpless. They are deaf and blind and about 8 to 16 ounces, but they grow really quickly. Sow milk is very rich and nutritious. By March, they'll be about 5 pounds, and by the time April comes, they are big enough to leave their dens. So we talked about this already. Most sows are having an average of 3 cubs, but it is not uncommon to see litters of 4, 5, and 6. We actually went out yesterday at a den site where the sow had 4 cubs. So we have a really high cub survival rate. And in that 1.5 years that the cubs will spend with their mom, she will teach them everything they need to know about finding food and avoiding danger. So now I want to start talking a little bit about the research that we conduct at Fish and Wildlife to monitor our bear population and so that we can make management decisions. There's 3 different types of research, and I'll talk about each of them individually. So the first is research trapping. This is mainly how we monitor our population. We do this twice a year, so once in the late summer, early fall, and then again in the spring. The late spring, so we'll gear up to do this again in June next. And essentially, during a 2-week period, we will trap as many bears as we can, and we will collect biological information from them. And then based on the amount of bears that we're able to trap in that 2-year period can give us a good indication of their overall population. So how that works, there's 2 different types of traps that we utilize. The first is called a culvert trap. So that's this green one. This is what the outside looks like, and then the bottom left picture of that bear inside is what it looks like on the inside. There's holes on the side. So that was a photo that I just took through one of the holes. So essentially, that gate will just stay up and we will bait the inside. And once the bear walks in, it will trigger that gate to slide down behind them. The other type of trap is called a foot snare. And a lot of people, when they hear snare, they think of like the claw snares. That's not what we use. It's just a thick piece of cable that in this bottom right picture, you can see what it looks like all buried under the ground. Once the bear steps into that square, it will trigger a mechanism to tighten the cable around their paw. And it doesn't lock or anything. You can expand it out. The bears just typically aren't able to free themselves, though they can. And the cable wires are long enough that they can still move around a bit and climb. We check the traps multiple times a day so bears aren't in them long at all. So the first thing that we would do when we find a bear trapped is we need to sedate that bear so that they are safe to work with. So how we do that is we have the sedative on the end of what we call a jab pole, and we will administer the sedative that way. It can vary based on the bear and how they're acting especially, but it takes about 10 minutes for the bear to fall asleep, and it will last for about an hour. So some of the information that we collect during that time, we'll take measurements of the head, body, paws, and if it's a female, their teats, because that can help give us information on if she's had cubs already. We'll do an age analysis, which we'll talk about on the next slide. And we'll take a tissue sample for DNA analysis. We are working with East Stroudsburg University on developing a DNA analysis protocol that should help us be able to utilize tissue samples to extrapolate out and get a population size on that, which is a much less invasive way of doing so than how we do it now. So we're excited to see the results from that. They are working on processing a few years worth of data right now. So hopefully we can have that information out to the public in the next year or so. We'll also take a blood sample where we can screen for common diseases that black bears might get and just get an overall picture of their health. So here is what I meant by doing an age analysis. The most accurate way to age a bear is to pull a tooth. So similar to the rings on a tree trunk, you can count the rings inside the cross section of a bare tooth to age them. So when cubs are born, they will get a set of baby teeth or milk teeth, and around 2 years old, those will have fallen out and their adult teeth will come in. But when these adult teeth come in, they are hollow. However, every year, a new layer of cementum will get deposited within that tooth. So if you take a cross section of it, you'll be able to see what we call the annuli rings, so the different layers of cementum. And under a microscope, it looks sort of like this. So every ring represents a year, another year in that bear's life, starting around age 2 when they got their adult teeth. So every time we handle a bear, they receive a unique identification number so we can follow that bear throughout its life. That number is on a metal tag that will get placed onto their ears. Sometimes these tags do fall off, so we also tattoo the number on the inside of their upper lip as well. We don't typically weigh the bears in the field. We will sometimes if we have a specific reason to, but it's a little bit tricky. So most of the time we're just doing a weight estimate. Our biologists have handled and moved a lot of bears to know and understand, to give a good accurate estimate of that bear's weight. So radiotelemetry, that is the second type of research that we conduct, and that is so that we can gather information on home range and habitat use mostly, and also reproduction, because this is how we locate our collared females and when they are hibernating in the winter. So we know where their den sites are. So essentially a radio collar, the bear will be fitted with the collar and it will emit out radio waves on a certain frequency. We will have a receiver that can pick up those radio waves and it will produce a beeping noise. And the closer we get to that animal, the louder the beep will be. So that is how we can locate them. So den work is the last type of research. This is ongoing currently. We do it starting in the beginning of March and before April when the bears are waking up. So it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. We will locate our collared females within their dens, and we will sedate the female, and we will check to see how many cubs she has to monitor reproduction and recruitment into the population. So when we handle the cubs, we're doing the same thing that we do with the adults. They're all getting tags and numbers. They're weighed and measured. And we will actually weigh the cubs. It's much easier to weigh a cub than an adult bear. And based on the amount of bears that we are handling every year, we can get a really good estimate of the population. We are working on our 2024 number, but so the most current one we have in 2020 suggests that we have over 3,000 bears just in our research area. So just in Northwest New Jersey where we are conducting research. So it's probable that that number is higher. And this number kind of waxes and wanes due to different factors like food availability. But we've had a pretty decent population for some time now. So now I want to pivot into our safety section, starting with what are some of the issues that can happen when people and black bears live so close? And, like, why are these education efforts and our research so important to protecting not only the bears, but public safety as well? So anthropomorphism, this is a term that just means when you attribute uniquely human characteristics and qualities to non-human beings. So this is something that residents do a lot with bears because unfortunately they are very cute. So a lot of times their behavior can be misread or misinterpreted. And a lot of people then feel the need to do things like feed wildlife because they look sad or they look hungry or they're very cute and they look like my friend. A lot of issues can happen when people begin to feed wildlife, especially wildlife that is potentially dangerous to them, like black bears. So habituation occurs when black bears, who are naturally wary of people, lose that natural fear and become comfortable moving into human spaces and even approaching humans. And this process typically starts when bears have access to unnatural food sources like human food and human garbage. So feeding bears intentionally or unintentionally, meaning if you have food sources out in your house, you're not necessarily hand feeding a donut to a bear. It is illegal. Both of those situations are illegal. There is a fine of $1,000 per offense. So this was a story of a boy and his father that were hiking up in Alamuchi, and they were tossing marshmallows to a black bear to try to get it to come closer. Unfortunately, when they turned around to leave, the black bear reached out to grab the food, and ended up injuring the boy, so his father did have to pay that fine. This was another extreme example of a couple that were feeding a family of black bears on their back deck. And it started really getting out of control when they were unable to continue feeding them. And the bears started attempting to enter the home. So that window under the deck there that's propped open, the bear actually entered into their basement. So they had to do a lot of precautions. They had to spray down their deck with a bleach and water solution to get that scent attractant down. They put up a gate that was electrified to discourage the bears from coming up. So they had to take a lot of sort of extreme measures to correct that behavior. But as I mentioned briefly, not all feeding is intentional. And regarding human bear conflict, garbage is really the #1 problem in our state. It's the biggest way that we tell black bears it's okay to come into our spaces because they're going to get a generous food reward. So feeding bears, whether intentionally or unintentionally, changes their behavior. Natural bear behavior is to be shy and wary and run away when they see a human. But if they're getting a food reward and they're being rewarded for being in close proximity to humans, they're going to start taking more risks, all the way until they start displaying threatening behavior, approaching people or pets, approaching tents, buildings, vehicles, or even physically contacting humans or pets. There is a lot of data and research to support the fact that a lot of aggressive bears are food conditioned habituated bears. So really a lot of these, so to speak, problem bears start with humans, teaching them that it's rewarding for them to come into our presence. So we have developed at Fish and Wildlife the black bear rating and response criteria. And this is how, when we receive calls from the public complaining about a bear or reporting a bear incident, this is how we rate the severity of that incident so that we can understand how to proceed with responding. So there's 3 categories. Category 3, these are just kind of bears being bears. A lot of times we will get calls from people saying, I saw a bear in my backyard or I saw a bear in the park. We will provide education to these people over the phone, whether that's trying to help them understand why the bear was there or to help work with them to reduce attractants on their property if they are not interested in having the bears return. But we really don't respond in any other way. Category 2, these are nuisance bears that are not directly a threat to public safety or property. They're usually doing minor property damage, like ripping up your garbage can or breaking the lattice under your stairs, things like that. Property damage under $1,000. Category 1 bears, these are the most serious calls that we receive. These are bears that are directly a threat to public safety and property. So these are your human and dog attacks. And we'll get a little bit more into what types of incidents correspond to what category. So category 3 bears, so just bears being bears, may also occasionally utilize bird feeders and trash as supplemental food sources, but maybe they're not necessarily a nuisance causing any damage, but they will utilize these feeding opportunities if they are presented to them. Category 2 black bears, these are our habitual trash visitors that are doing some damage. And as I said before, garbage is really the number one way that we teach bears to come into our neighborhoods. So as I sort of briefly mentioned, category two black bear incidents, the damage is typically under $1,000. So the picture here is there was a black bear that was scouting out a den site under these person's stairs, and the bear kind of broke away the lattice that was covering this space here. Some other category two incidents might be unprotected livestock. So if you've made no attempt to secure your chickens, or if you've got like outdoor rabbits and a black bear gets into them, we don't consider that abnormal bear behavior because, they're not getting over, they're not having to be overly persistent if the opportunity is presented right in front of them. Additionally, a provoked dog attack. So if there's your dog is off leash and you're hiking and your dog chases into a bear den or chases a bear and your dog gets attacked, again, we don't consider that unnatural black bear behavior. Our category two response is something called aversive conditioning. So it's essentially creating a negative experience for the bear on site. So we might use things like rubber buckshot or pyrotechnic charges or flares. And we utilize local law enforcement to do that. We do police trainings. We've trained thousands of officers on how to respond to these types of incidents so that they can be a supplemental resource for us. So category one black bears, some of the more serious incidents include home entries, especially food conditioned bears may take it one step further and try to enter your home. Vehicle entries or tent entries, also category one behavior. Pet attacks that are unprovoked. Say you're walking your dog and the dog is leashed and you're being responsible and a bear comes out of nowhere and attacks your dog. That is considered abnormal bear behavior and thus threatening and unusual. Livestock attack, if you've got electric fencing up or you've made substantial attempts to protect your livestock and the bear still gets through all of those protections, again, we consider that a dangerous bear. It's abnormal behavior. That bear is likely very food conditioned and very habituated. Same for crops as well, same rule. Same for beehives. We have a lot of residents in New Jersey that like to keep bees, and a lot of these beekeepers do a great job at utilizing electric fencing to protect their hives. And property damage that's over $1,000 is also considered category one behavior. The most serious, though, is of course a human attack. Black bears are not typically aggressive, but attacks do happen. And as I mentioned before, it is typically habituated bears that are more likely to approach humans and thus engage in aggressive behavior. So one of the best ways, in my opinion, that we manage our bear population is through our black bear education program. So we distribute millions of educational black bear literature. We've presented thousands of public programs to hundreds of thousands of people. We work with a marketing company to not only air radio, TV, PSAs concerning bear behavior at peak times, we're also airing these on social media now and trying to integrate them into even streaming services like Netflix and Hulu. We handle thousands of calls annually, and we've trained thousands of law enforcement officers as well to respond to bear incidents. So what are some of the things that you can do to discourage bears from coming onto your property and ultimately to protect them and their population? So the best gold standard thing you can do, because most of these problems come about because bears are getting into garbage and getting access to human food, the best thing you can do is to get yourself a bear-resistant garbage can. And these bear-resistant cans are tested at a facility in Montana that has captive grizzlies. They will be stored with a bunch of food and thrown in with a hungry grizzly, and if they can survive an hour, then they get that certification. We have a list of suppliers on our website. There's also a lot of other things you can do if that's not an option. They do also make bear resistant kits that you can add to your current garbage can that are pretty much consist of different types of straps to lock down the lid. Some other common sense things that you can integrate into your routine, always putting garbage and recycling out on collection day, not the night before. If you remember, black bears are crepuscular. So if you put your garbage out the night before, bears are very active through the night, but also mostly in those early dawn hours. So you're giving the bears a lot of opportunity to access your garbage and figure out how to get in. If you're putting your garbage out, shortly before collection, you're cutting down a lot of time that bear has access to your trash. You should be washing your containers weekly with a disinfectant, even if the cans don't necessarily smell to you. Certainly, the black bears can smell them, and they can smell them from up to 2 miles away. If you have a persistent bear and it's not an option for you to get a bear-resistant container, we've had success with residents placing rags soaked in disinfectants like bleach and putting those rags or towels on top of the trash bags to help reduce the scent attractant. It sounds obvious, but having enough garbage cans that all of your trash will fit inside the container. And you should always store the containers within a secure building like a shed or in some sort of suitable enclosure when you're not using them. If you do have a certified container, though, they are built to be left outdoors. So bird feeders, we kind of showed you some pictures before. Bird feeders are a really attractive food source for bears. We do recommend that you don't feed birds. They don't need it. But if you would like to, we recommend feeding them from December 1st through April 1st when bears are the least active. We recommend hanging your feeders up 10 feet off the ground and away from anything like tree limbs or a tree trunk that a bear could climb. And we never hang a bird feeder off of your house where you're living. You should also clean up the seeds that spill daily and bring those feeders in at night. So those are all ways that you can reduce the amount of time a bear has to get into your bird feeders. Pets, we recommend not feeding them outdoors. Cat food, dog food, these are very attractive food sources for bears. But if you do feed them outdoors, feed them in single servings. Don't leave the food out all day. Clean up whatever mess or whatever food is left behind and try not to store that food outdoors. Same for grills, just make sure that they're cleaned thoroughly. Grease is a really big attractant for bears. So don't just, clean out the grease or dump your cooking grease in your backyard. Always make sure you're disposing of it properly into your garbage and then into your, secure garbage can. And you should store your grill in a secure shed or garage if you can after each use. People have other things on their property which might attract bears, such as compost piles. For compost, we recommend only composting vegetable matter because things like dairy and other sweeter types of foods can attract bears. You can add lime to reduce that scent attractant for the bear and to speed up the decomposition process. And we also recommend, if you've got a vegetable garden, harvesting those immediately, not leaving vegetables out there. There's some other attractants on your property that you might want to consider installing electric fencing around if you live in a bear-dense area. Electric fencing is really the best and safest way to deter a black bear. And we have on our website guidelines on how to do this effectively for black bears specifically. So hiking and camping safety, this is a big one for those who like to recreate outdoors. For hiking, here's a couple common sense tips. Know when bears are most active and avoid hiking during those hours. So we talked about it, bears are most active at dawn, dusk, and they are active throughout the night. So especially avoid hiking alone during these times. Know when you're in good bear habitat. So if you're in Northwest New Jersey in a densely forested region, odds are you're in good bear habitat. Know when you're in areas where they're likely to be foraging, such as if there's areas of thick brush that can hide them well, where there's these large areas of flowering plants or bushes that have berries on them. That's a good indication that you're in an area where a black bear might be foraging, especially in the late summer and fall. They're going to be out feeding. Watch out for bear signs. So some signs that you're in an area that's frequented by a bear. Of course, bear scat, bear footprints. Also, if you see logs that are kind of torn up or earth that has recently been dug, that's a good sign that a bear has been around looking for food. In this bottom left corner here, this is called a marker tree. Bears, especially male bears, will bite and claw a tree to leave their scent behind, and it kind of leaves them looking like this. This is a bit of an extreme example. It won't always look like this, but that's a good indication that you're within the home range of a male bear. So when you're hiking, you should always be alert. Understand when you're in bear territory or home, good bear country. Carry things that make noise if you're nervous. Air horns, whistles, especially if you have small children with you. And have a plan for children. Let them know what they should do when they see a bear. Another point is never approach a carcass. A bear might be nearby and bears may get defensive over these carcasses. So one of the best things you can do when you're hiking is just to be hiking in a group. Typically, the normal noise that you make while hiking, talking, laughing, even singing, is enough to keep a bear away from you. Um, and you never want to surprise a bear. So if you're making noise, talking and laughing, you're gonna let that bear know that you're in the area, and likely they are going to, um, they're gonna leave you alone. And if you do see a bear before it notices you, just kind of calmly back away from the area and keep an eye on the bear. Don't ever approach that bear. So of course, never approach a bear. If you would like to view or photograph wildlife, utilize binoculars, spotting scopes, telephoto lenses. You don't want to get too close. You should know the early warning signs that you're too close. So there's some aspects of bear behavior that might let you know that you are too close, even if you don't think you are. Huffing, so when the bear makes a series of quick breaths, like jaw popping. It really sounds like they're clacking their teeth together and sucking their lips at the same time, kind of like they do that one a lot. And bluff charges. So this is when the bear will sort of pounce and then back up, and then pounce and then back up. All of these things are behaviors that show you that you're too close and you need to back away from that bear immediately. One of the common misconceptions is that a standing bear is sort of a precursor to a charge. Standing is not a threatening behavior. It's a curious behavior. So likely that bear is just trying to get a better view of what they're smelling or hearing. So that's not necessarily a threatening behavior. So if you're out camping, the biggest way to keep yourself safe is to reduce your scent attractants. So make sure your campsite is clean. Don't leave food out. Always store food items in airtight containers. If you don't have a bear-proof container or a bear bag that you can hang in a tree with sort of the same guidelines as the bird feeder, 10 feet up and 10 feet away, you can store that food in the trunk of your vehicle is also a good place. You should understand that it's not only just food too, also scented toiletries may attract a bear. So never store food or scented toiletries in your tent where you're going to be sleeping at night. And another tip is to change into clean clothes before you go to bed so that you're minimizing, whatever food odors got on you during the day while cooking or eating. You should avoid making garbage, like more garbage than you need to, by only cooking as much as you'll eat in a meal. Making sure you're cleaning whatever you're using to cook, so all utensils, grills, make sure you're cleaning them thoroughly. Pack everything out. So you don't want to burn or bury garbage. Make sure you're packing everything that you bring in out. Another piece of advice when you're setting up your campground, if you're in a bear dense area, make sure you're setting up your campsite away from commonly used animal trails, and then areas that look like good bear habitat. So thick brush, bear food sources like berry patches, or streams where there may be fish. Set up your sleeping area 100 yards from food storage. So you don't want to be sleeping close to where you're going to be eating. Always make sure that there's at least 100 yards between your cooking and eating area and your sleeping area. That way, if a bear comes onto your campsite, they're not necessarily attracted to your tent where you are. But ensure that those cooking and eating areas are in view from where you're sleeping in case, you need to be aware if there's a bear at your campsite. Placing tents in a line is a good way to have viewable space on all sides rather than in a circle. And it also helps if the bear not feel surrounded, and they'll have an avenue of escape if they do approach your tent. If you've got pets with you, always make sure your dogs especially are leashed and you're cleaning up their food. Dogs tend to aggravate black bears, so always make sure they're leashed. And anytime you have an incident with a black bear or have black bear damage, you can always report that to our warning hotline, 877-WARN-DEP, and then that will get kicked to the appropriate resource. And the last thing I want to talk about is what you should actually do if you do come into contact with a black bear. So there's a couple of things that we've already talked about where you can prevent. Grouping up, making noise, and making sure you're storing your food properly are the best ways to prevent a black bear encounter. But if you do encounter one, remain calm. You do not want to run away. Make sure there's an escape route for the bear. Don't corner it. and make loud noises and make yourself look big. So we recommend shouting and clapping over your head to make yourself look as tall as possible and to make noise. Avoid eye contact with the bear. They can perceive that as a threat and back away slowly. If the bear does engage in a bluff charge, as I talked about before, you do want to make sure that you're standing your ground. You don't want to react by running away to that charge. If the bear doesn't leave while you're making noise and you're backing away, just move to a secure area like your vehicle, a tent, a building, somewhere where you will be safe. A couple of things not to do. Of course, never approach, feed, or pet a bear. We talked about it, but never run. That is because black bears are predators, and what runs from a predator is prey. So you don't want to activate that predatory response in a bear and cause them to think, oh, I should chase this. You also never want to play dead. That's one that we hear a lot. That can work in certain encounters with grizzly bears, but that's a whole other conversation. It is never a viable option with a black bear. Black bear attacks are rare, but they do happen. If you are attacked, you must fight back. And it's not necessarily about overpowering the black bear. You're not going to be able to overpower them. They are bigger and stronger than us. It's about convincing that bear that you are not worth it. The energy output would be too great. So you can successfully fight off a bear attack by aiming for the eyes and nose with all of your strength and utilize whatever you have around you, rocks, sticks. You can throw non-food items at the bear to discourage them to get away and really just give it all you've got. So that's all I have. I tried to cut that right at 45 minutes so that there was time for questions if anyone had any. If you're not comfortable asking questions in this session, you can always email me. If you're interested in setting up one of these presentations for another group that you're aware of, please email me or go through our website on the Fish and Wildlife /bears. You can request a program or exhibit. And that's also the number that you can contact me at. So I will open this up now, I guess, for some questions, if there are any.
All right, thank you so much, Stephanie. If anybody does have questions, you can certainly send them to us via the chat or the Q&A, and we'll be happy to address them. Let's see. How is it that black bears made it to northern Ocean County?
So we unfortunately don't do research in south of that northeast portion of the state. So we don't necessarily know for sure if there are established populations down south. We know that they are dispersing. So we had a couple collared males that we tracked. We had one male who went all the way from Alamuchee down to Lakehurst and then back up to Alamuchee in a matter of 5 days. So we know these bears can travel really long distances, likely in search for food. Those subadult males searching for their own home territory can cover really large expanses of land for a multitude of reasons, like searching for a new home range, searching for food, searching for mating opportunities. We don't believe that there are established populations in South Jersey. We believe that's mostly dispersing bears, but we are looking to expand our research program into more southern areas of New Jersey to see what's going on there. But they can travel really long distances in short periods of time.
Um, where do they get such caloric content during the fall hyperphagia?
So you would be surprised. A lot of research has designated that just acorns are enough to be an indication of how robust and healthy the population is. So it's a really great predictor of things like fecundity, so how many cubs a female will have throughout their life, body size, life expectancy. So those acorns, hickory nuts, hazelnuts, those are calorie dense natural foods for them. And unfortunately, in New Jersey, they will also utilize things like our garbage, but our natural food sources are enough for that fall hyperphagia season. They will eat all day. Just, pounds and pounds of these acorns, nuts, bugs, small mammals. They're out searching for all of these things, and those are sufficient for them.
As the bear's habitat has seemed to kind of increase over the past few decades, has that risen or caused a rise in human interactions, or do you see that education is playing a role in maybe decreasing the number?
Unfortunately, we're seeing a rise. I think I have a slide in here. My cursor is gone. on like a supplemental slide where I have a graph where you can see, maybe it's this one. Not that one. Okay, so this right here is showing, let me bring this bigger. So this here is a graph showing in green, that's the total complaints that we get. And in blue, those are our just category 1 and 2, so our damage and nuisance calls. So they were rising for a really long time. I guess you could say we're seeing them overall decrease with the bear hunt being active again, but they're still sort of waxing and waning. We've seen an overall increase since before 1999. So these numbers are all much higher than in the 90s and 80s, but the bear hunt has really helped kind of decrease that. But there's lots of factors that play in. I think education is certainly helping. I think the hunting season helps. Um, and as people get more educated, I do think it helps, but it kind of waxes and wanes due to, a multitude of things. There any other questions? I'm not sure if I answered that well, but
I don't see any other questions at this point. We can give it a few minutes. Um,
I can show a video of the huff and the jaw pop if anyone is interested. I don't always play it in the slides because sometimes depending on the medium that I'm presenting on, it freezes up the presentation. But maybe I can, if anyone can hear this. So that bear did a huff first and then just a little bit of a jaw pop. So we were close to this bear because we had trapped it, of course, and we were about to administer the sedative. So it was annoyed with us. I'll play it one more time. So those would be considered threatening behaviors. If there's anything else, I'm happy to answer.
I don't see any more questions that have come in. So anything you would like to close with?
Um, Just that the best way that you can protect bears is to help keep them wild. So reducing the chance that bears will become habituated will ultimately protect the population. That is my goal. That's why I do this job. I really believe that we can, manage bears by managing people. And just integrating some of these small common sense, changes to your routine, changes to your behavior can really help our bear population. I would like to see us continue to have a healthy population for years to come so our children and our children's children can enjoy the wildlife of New Jersey. I enjoy living in a state where we are so close to wildlife, and I'd like to keep it that way. So I hope that everyone can help do their part to keep our bear population healthy.
Somebody asked if you could go back to the picture of the bear scat, just so that they have
Oh,
a
sure.
reference.
Sure. And it doesn't always look exactly like that. It can be a little bit more difficult to identify. Like this one is really obvious because you can see the berries like right in the poop. And it will look different seasonally, but generally this is what it looks like. It can also be like, especially in the summer, a lighter color, more like a soft chocolate ice cream when they're eating a lot of like mushy berries. But it does look very different than like deer or dog poop. Like it's usually not formed. It's kind of more of like a mass, a large mass.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. We really, really
Yeah, of
appreciate
course.
you presenting today, and thank you everybody for attending. I hope you found it informative. Just everybody just be safe. If you are in an area where bears are active, be sure to take the precautionary steps that Stephanie discussed, and feel free to reach out to the DEP anytime, so that to report anything, or if you have further questions, they'll be able to provide you with more information. So again, thank you, Stephanie, and thank you everybody for attending today. Everybody be safe, be well, and as we get into the spring, enjoy the outdoors.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.